On December 26, 1996, a 911 call came in from a quiet, upscale home in Boulder, Colorado. And that call kicked off what would become one of the most infamous, most baffling, and most intensely scrutinized unsolved murders in American history. For almost 3 decades, this case has been an absolute maze of conflicting evidence, shocking procedural errors, and theories that have torn investigators and the public apart. Today, we're going to cut through all that noise. We're doing a serious, forensic deep dive into the evidence of the Jon Benet Ramsey homicide.
But before we get into the weeds of the investigation, it is so important to just pause and remember who is at the very heart of this story: a 6-year-old girl named Jon Benet Ramsey. Her life and its absolutely tragic end became a national obsession. But beyond the headlines, she was a daughter, a sister, and the victim of a brutal crime that to this day remains a deep, unsettled tragedy.
You know, right from the very beginning, this case just didn't add up. Law enforcement was faced with 3 core elements that were completely perplexing. First, you have a frantic, chaotic 911 call from Jon Benet's mother, Patsy. Then you have this bizarrely long 3-page ransom note found inside the house. And then, hours later, the devastating discovery of Jon Benet's body, not miles away with a kidnapper, but in a small, forgotten room in her own family's basement.
So, to make sense of this incredibly complex case, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll walk through the timeline of that fateful morning. Then, we'll have to examine the compromised crime scene and all the forensic puzzle pieces left behind. We'll do a deep analysis of that really strange ransom note, weigh the evidence for the 2 dominant theories, and finally, look at the case's unsettled legacy.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning. To understand anything about this case, you have to know the critical sequence of events as they unfolded on the day after Christmas, 1996.
So it all kicks off around 5:30 in the morning. Patsy Ramsey says she found the ransom note on a back staircase. Less than 30 minutes later, she makes that frantic 911 call reporting her daughter has been kidnapped. An officer is on the scene within minutes, but for the next 7 hours, this is treated as a kidnapping investigation. It's not until just after 1 p.m., 7 hours later, that a detective finally tells Jon Ramsey to search the house, and he discovers his daughter's body. The coroner's team wouldn't even remove her body until almost 11 o'clock that night. Just an unbelievable day of confusion and horror.
And this brings us to what is, without a doubt, the single biggest problem in this entire investigation. It's the original sin of the case, really. The handling of the Ramsey home is a textbook example of how to contaminate a crime scene. It's a study in procedural failure.
Because the police thought they were dealing with a kidnapping, they didn't treat the house like a potential homicide scene. It wasn't sealed off, friends and family were allowed to just come and go, they were in the kitchen, making coffee, comforting the Ramseys, somebody even cleaned the kitchen counters, maybe wiping away fingerprints, fibers, who knows what. And then, the most critical errors of all, Jon Ramsey himself finds and moves his daughter's body, carrying her upstairs, and he immediately rips the duct tape off her mouth. Now you can understand that from a father's perspective, but from a forensic perspective, it's a disaster. The primary evidence was compromised right then and there.
And the criticism wasn't just in hindsight. It was immediate, and it was brutal. This quote from the Denver Post really captures the shock that everyone, professionals and the public, was feeling. These early mistakes created this giant evidentiary vacuum. And that's where all the speculation and competing theories have been able to grow for decades, because the physical proof was so badly damaged from the get-go.
Okay, but even with that severe contamination, investigators did manage to collect some really significant forensic evidence. So now let's dive into the clinical findings from the autopsy and the physical evidence from the scene. And together, well, they paint a very, very complex picture.
The murder weapon itself is one of the strangest parts of this case. Jon Benet was strangled with this garrote. It's a ligature device, but look at what it's made from: a length of nylon cord and a broken piece of a paintbrush handle. And get this, the other half of that paintbrush was found later in a tub of Patsy Ramsey's art supplies. This wasn't a weapon an intruder brought with him. It was built from items found inside the house. The complexity of the knot used has been a huge point of debate ever since.
The autopsy told a horrific story. There were essentially 2 causes of death. Jon Benet had a massive 8.5-inch skull fracture from a heavy blow to the head, but the official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation. The key thing here is the coroner determined she was alive when both of these injuries happened. The autopsy also found undigested pineapple in her stomach, which was a big deal because it contradicted her parents' story that she was asleep when they got home. And finally, there was clear evidence of vaginal injury, but no semen was found, and it looked like the area had been wiped, which suggests someone tried to clean up and destroy evidence.
And the rest of the crime scene was just a mess of contradictions. You had an unidentified high-tech boot print near the body. There was a broken basement window, which seems like an entry point, right? But, and this is a huge but, there was a perfectly intact spiderweb on the grate on the outside of the window. How could an intruder get in without disturbing it? And then the most critical piece for many. Unidentified male DNA was found in her underwear and under her fingernails. Add a non-family pubic hair and what some investigators thought were stun gun marks, and you've got a puzzle where none of the pieces seem to fit.
All right, now we have to talk about what might be the single most bizarre piece of evidence in this whole thing, the ransom note. Seriously? There's almost nothing like it in the history of crime, and its weird characteristics tell a story all on their own.
First, let's just look at the amount of money. The note demanded exactly $118,000. Now that is a weirdly specific number. It's not a round number like 100,000. Well, it turns out it was the precise value of Jon Ramsey's recent Christmas bonus from his company. A very specific figure that very few people outside the family or his office would know.
And the strangeness just keeps on coming. The note was 3 pages long. Experts estimated it would take over 20 minutes to write. What kind of intruder hangs around a crime scene for that long to write a note? And it was written on a notepad and with a pen taken from inside the Ramsey house. Linguistically, it's a total mess. It uses sophisticated words like hence, but then misspells simple words like business. A lot of experts think that suggests an educated person trying to sound uneducated. And to top it all off, it's full of phrases that seem to be lifted straight out of movies like Dirty Harry and Ransom. It just doesn't read like a real ransom note.
So you take all this stuff, the chaotic crime scene, the autopsy findings, that bonkers note, and it has all fueled 2 main competing theories that have basically defined this case for nearly 30 years. So let's lay out the evidence for each side by side.
Okay, so on the one hand, you've got the intruder theory, and that's supported by some pretty powerful physical evidence. The unidentified male DNA, that boot print, the pubic hair, the broken window. But on the other hand, the family involvement theory rests on all these incredibly suspicious circumstances around the ransom note, written in the house, with their pen, for the exact bonus amount. Add the fact that the garrote was made from Patsy's art supplies and there were no signs of forced entry, and you can see why this case has divided people for so long.
Now, the absolute cornerstone of the intruder theory is the DNA evidence they call unknown male 1. This is a partial DNA profile from an unidentified male found mixed with JonBenet's blood on our underwear and long johns. Critically, it did not match Jon, Patsy, or their son Burke. And when they ran it through CODIS, the National DNA Database, nothing, no matches. For people who believe an intruder killed Jon Benet, this is Exhibit.
But of course, the DNA story is not that simple. Nothing in this case is. A huge twist came in 2008 when the district attorney, Mary Lacey, publicly exonerated the Ramseys based on new touch DNA analysis. It seemed like a bombshell. But then, in 2016, other experts took another look at that same evidence and argued that the 2008 conclusion was just wrong. They said the sample wasn't from one single person, but a complex mixture of DNA from at least 3 individuals. And that's a game changer, because a mixture could just be trace DNA from the manufacturing process, which would make it basically useless for identifying a killer.
So for our final section, let's pull the lens back a bit from the specifics of the crime. The Jon Benet Ramsey case left a permanent mark on law enforcement, on forensic science, and on the public's whole relationship with the justice system.
Just look at the sheer scale of this cold case. It's staggering. We're talking about an investigation that has gone on for decades, spanning continents. It's generated over 21,000 tips and letters. Investigators have analyzed almost 2,500 pieces of evidence and interviewed more than 1,000 people. It's just a testament to the case's complexity and the enormous resources that have been poured into trying to find an answer.
And its legacy is profound. This case is literally taught in police academies as the ultimate example of how not to manage a crime scene. It forced real changes in police protocols for suspected kidnappings. It also exposed this deep, damaging conflict between the Boulder police and the district attorney's office, which really hurt the investigation. And, let's be honest, for better or worse, it helped ignite the massive public fascination with true crime that is still going strong today.
But despite all the time that's passed, all the procedural failures, and all the contaminated evidence, law enforcement has never officially closed the book. As the Boulder police chief has said, the case remains active. In fact, in recent years, a special cold case review team has been digitizing over 1 million pages of case files, hoping that fresh eyes and new technology can finally find a path forward.
And that leaves us with one final, and I think really provocative question. Forensic science is constantly evolving. We now have incredible tools like investigative genetic genealogy. That's the same tech they used to catch the Golden State Killer. So, after nearly 30 years, is it possible that this new science could take those tiny trace amounts of DNA, that unknown male 1 profile, and finally attach it to a name and a face? Could technology finally give us the answer that decades of investigation never could?
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more content like this.